Welcome to another episode of Power Widget Deep Dives. Today's special guest is Rene Modery, and he'll be walking us through his Power Docu application. Hi, Rene. Welcome to the show. Thank you for spending the time and talking to us and sharing your insights on the Power Docu application. For those who may not have heard from you or seen you in the past, would you mind just introducing yourself first, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show. So yes, my name is Rene Modery. I'm based in always sunny Singapore, originally from Germany, but moved over here a long time ago. I'm currently working at WPP, a very large global organization with more than 105,000, 110,000 employees spread across the globe, spread across different operating companies, agencies, etc., etc. So fairly large. I'm the Power Platform technical lead within the organization, so to say, responsible for all things technical from a high level point of view, etc. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for, what is it? I think 12 years now. At some point, obviously, you're just basically a Microsoft MVP and stop counting how many rings you have or so. But yeah, my background is basically SharePoint and then Office 365. That's basically where I'm coming from. So all my basically awards that I received from Microsoft are in that space, you could say, never even Power Platform related so far. But anyway, a separate topic. Yeah, so yeah, that's basically the quick intro about myself. And as you mentioned, I mean, I'm couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I basically started to work on PowerDocu, a small tool that I basically initially just wanted to get started with for, let's call it a small proof of concept to see if that's basically something that I could implement and yeah, get set up for myself. And then it's been growing over time as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the main topic of today's episode is your Power Docu application. Now on this show, we like to get deep into it. So before we get into the demo, could you briefly outline to us what it is, what the target use cases are,
Yeah.
and what your journey has been in building the tool and how you got to where it is today?
Yeah, I mean, the scenario is basically what more or less everybody working with Power Apps or Power Automate experiences. You build an app, you build a flow, or yeah, probably a couple of them and put them in a solution or something like that. And yeah, you need to maintain it at some point, obviously. It might be that you're not constantly working on it. Might be, yeah, you've got something, it's working, running, etc., and you leave it as it is. But half a year later, there's a change request or you need to fix something, etc., and you're trying to figure out how does it work again? Because yeah, usually you forget half of what you've done and how you've done it, etc. And I saw that both from a personal and partially from a professional perspective. So I wanted to figure out, hey, those apps that I built, I need to make some changes, but I forgot where I used variables, for example, and what they're called and in which context. And like I said, where basically, for example, in my app. So back then, for example, when I built it, then there was no way, for example, to see directly in the Power Apps editor for Canvas apps and to see, yeah, what kind of variables do you have in the app, how do you use them, etc. So yeah, I wanted to basically get that out. And then I thought I could actually extend it a bit, not just trying to figure out basically what's actually happening or so, but really documenting it from a technical point of view. I mean, when you look at apps, flows, solutions generally, obviously there are a lot of things you could document. I mean, what is the app meant for, the solution meant for, who are the stakeholders, the whole process explanation, benefits, etc., etc. There's a lot of things that obviously you can't figure out by looking at the solution itself. So that's obviously something that needs to be documented manually. But I thought, again, how many screens do you have in the app, or how many actions you have in a flow, which connectors does it use, all those kind of things were things where I thought I should be able to actually just, I don't know, extract that from a app or a flow or solution, obviously, then, and put it into what I initially thought a Word document, and then basically just use that as the basis and as a technical documentation. Because we all know if you try to do that manually, yes, you can do it. Nobody likes to do it. And the moment you make a change, you need to update your documentation again. So yes, the never-ending challenge of how much do you basically document what you're doing. Nobody likes to do it, but you should do it. So yeah, I want to basically see what can I do to generate a bit of automated technical documentation. And yeah, so basically I started to work on a small proof of concept, took some of my apps and flows, simpler ones, and basically just looked directly into the underlying structure of those exported apps, flows, solutions, and see how they actually structure it. And then it became clearer how they work and what I could do then. And then yeah, build a small proof of concept so that I can just, basically take an existing, I think I started with flows initially, then take an existing flow and then just basically, like I said, write in a Word document, hey, here are the number of actions and maybe some properties, like what does the action specifically do, or which action comes next, etc. And obviously, the very first proof of concept was extremely simple, but I realized, yes, it can work. And then basically over time, I started to expand it. So I think the first 2 or 3 months after I basically published my first initial release were constant enhancements, because I mean the first release was very, very basic proof of concept, and I want to make sure that it should move towards the point where it's then actually useful for people. And yeah, what that meant is then, like I said, constant enhancements, or not just saying, yes, I document parts of it, but there were lots of additional things then added to, really, like I said, make it useful from my point of view initially, obviously, but then also hopefully then meant for others. So things that were added and at some point were, for example, putting a GUI on top, because initially it was just a console application that was a bit tricky to use, which was good enough for, again, demo testing purposes, but nobody likes to do something simple in a complicated manner. So I just put a GUI on top. And then other things were also added. So like I said, for example, making it more useful. One key thing for me, for example, was what I wanted to have is what I also realized is I wanted to have, for example, it's called a screenshot of a flow so that I can share it or could review it with team members or something like that. So really list me all the actions in their order. So yes, you can do that basically in Power Automate. You can go into the editor and obviously try to take a screenshot. But what I realized, obviously, depends on your screen resolution and how much can you see. And it was never really perfect. So one of the things that I also added and then relatively quickly was to, basically generate my own flow diagram, basically, so that you've got not just basically some long Word document with a lot of text in there, but also you've got that, you could say, the flow chart of your Power Automate flow, then showing again what's happening where, what are the actions called, which actions do you actually have? Is it, I don't know, connecting to SharePoint, Dataverse, Outlook, or is it a condition or an apply to each or something like that? Yeah. But long story short, then it started as a small proof of concept, was working. I enhanced it over time, then relatively quickly, and then continued to just work on it in the past 2.5 years now. And I didn't expect it to get, you could say, as big as it is right now, because sometimes I'm blown away how many people use it and such, because for me it was just like, I'm doing something for myself and maybe somebody else finds it useful. But I mean, that's the great thing then, that you receive a lot of feedback from other people who use it, and they find value in it. And I mean, I find it awesome, even though I think sometimes there's still a lot of things that aren't in there yet, that could be added, should be added, etc. But
No, that's a great story, a great journey. I mean, as a developer myself, I think we all know that documentation is never our top priority. It always goes at the bottom of the list. So often there's just never enough time for it within the budget of the project. So, and even if you did get the to kind of write the documentation manually, it's very clicky, interface to go into the maker portal, understand exactly what's going on, and then type it all out. So something like this is a lifesaver, basically. So I think it's a well worth talking about and sharing with the community. So well done, and thank you for that. So next I'd like to actually go into a full-on demo, please. If that's okay. If you could share with us the magic that you've created and in the features of the application, and if you could speak about the target use case and how it all works.
Absolutely. So what I have here is basically for demo purposes, I added a couple of solutions from the COE toolkit. I think the older versions, actually, ones that I used for quite some time, plus some some of my own solutions. I know that there's a flow, there's an app, there's another flow, there's another app that I exported a long time ago, as you can see from the date, in basically the MS app format, etc. But yeah, so basically that's what I'm going to show now. How can you take your existing solution, which might include an app or a flow or both or so, or multiple instances, and then have it documented. And when I say app, I actually haven't clarified it yet, but main focus for me was, for example, on Canvas apps, but I'm slowly working towards model-driven apps. When I say slowly, the restriction is really the time that I have to work on things. So I started working on adding, for example, documenting data-verse tables, which is, of course, is done, you could say, slowly bringing me towards the stage where I then would have model-driven apps properly documented. But yeah, that's probably going to be an ongoing thing again for a while. Anyway, so jumping into the demo, let me just start the application. So here is PowerDocu GUI that I can launch. So dialog is relatively simple. I hope it's relatively simple. So all I have is a couple of smaller configuration options. The default options are relatively straightforward. So I'm going to create a Word document. Alternatively, I could create Markdown or both. I can say what I want to document, for example, for Canvas apps. So I want to say document, for example, changes only. Because if you have, for example, let's say you add a button or label to your app, there are lots of properties, but not all of them are changed by you. So you might say, no, I don't want to document everything because I only really want to document anything that has been changed that is not the default, because the default is something we just accept, but the changes are important. Separately, then sort flow actions, for example, as you can imagine, let's say you've got a flow with 50 different actions. When you open a documentation, you might say, yeah, maybe I want to sort it by name or by order of appearance, so to say, from top to bottom or start to end. But yeah, just going to keep it simple now. Let's just keep it as by name. So once I'm happy with my configuration, I just basically go to the next screen, say, okay, I'm now going to select my, again, app, flow, solution, or multiple of them. And yeah, all I need to do is then select it. So in this case here, I'm just going to select now my full weather zip, which is an exported solution of a flow. And as you can see, I mean, at the bottom, it just tells you what it is. So loads the file, extracts the information, checks what is in that zip file actually, are there any apps, are there any flows, potentially also dataverse tables, etc., and starts documenting it.
Okay,
It then
sorry,
yeah.
Does it matter if it's an unmanaged or a managed solution, or doesn't
Not at
matter?
all, no. I mean, it takes anything you throw at it. When I say anything, obviously there are things that it can't document, but managed, unmanaged, I'm just curious. I think I might document, for example, that specific property as part of the solution documentation. So if it's a full solution that you document, again, then you know whether it's unmanaged or managed. That should be in there. But yeah, otherwise, anyway, it documents it the way it basically discovers it.
Okay.
And what it then does now here is, so let me just jump back to my folder where I've got my files here, basically my exported solutions, etc. It creates a dedicated folder then with the documentation inside. So what we have is, again, as described, for example, here, let me just open two files. The flow itself, for example, so you can see here, this now how this particular flow looks like. So it creates a simple overview, so it doesn't go too deep into the, I don't know, the nested structure or so. So really just on a high level, so you see how it looks like from a very top point of view. So I know, yeah, there's an API to each with things happening, and then there's another condition, check if any event found, etc. But I'm not looking specifically what's happening in there, because we've also got the detailed view that you can see here, and here you can see, oh, there's lots of things happening inside. So again, I see my apply to each, and I can see, yeah, there's a compose action, there's another condition. If it's no, it goes over to the left. If it's yes, it goes over to set flight variable, etc. But you get the idea. So there are lots of things happening, and oh, apologies, hit the microphone. And yeah, and in what I then, for example, also added, I mean, try to follow mostly some of the colors that Microsoft used or still uses. So you see purple, that's usually the variables. You see the gray boxes, those are then the I don't know, control actions. And for example, with the green, red, obviously is like you've got your condition. If this condition is met, it goes to the yes side, the green side, otherwise red, etc. Plus you've got your icons. So, and yeah, I think the key value of this one here is this is something that I could easily share with somebody else. So what I have is actually not just the chart itself, but you can see it's basically, actually I have the chart itself, but what I have it in PNG format and SVG format. So SVG, as you can see, obviously scales very nicely, so I can easily zoom in, still see it in good quality and zoom out, etc. PNG is then obviously if you want to share it in a document or so, it's usually or often a better version sometimes, but yeah, you get the idea basically. Now, just to show you, I opened the same flow actually over here in Power Automate, and you can see basically what it does here. So this is exactly what we just saw here separately, for example, in this one. So you've got your recurrence, your variables, your get calendar applied to each, and check if any event found. Same thing basically that you have here.
It's really
Now,
nice. So these diagrams, is there any kind of library or assembly you're using to generate that?
there is a library, so there is a standard, well, it is a standardized diagramming language basically that I use here in the backend. So there's a free library that I use that is basically .NET based, and that makes use of that library. So this is GraphViz, so there are some, it's a relatively standardized thing. Let me just check. What I don't have here right now is, for example, the generated we call it dot language description that tells, for example, specifically how it looks like. But I think it's something that I might export at some point soon, so you could take that information for other purposes as well. But yeah, like described basically, there's some existing library that I'm reusing to make it easy. Thoughts were, oh, maybe I could try Visio, obviously, because Visio is a very good standard, but Visio is quite complex to generate. There are others that have something in place and use it, but I realized I'm going to start with something relatively simple that I could get started with without spending I don't know, a couple of weeks basically building my own Visio generation library. And this was something that I'm going to say it worked from day one onwards, but it didn't take too long actually to get it started up and working.
That's nice.
All right. Anyway, so I mentioned also the Word document. Let's just quickly open that. So there's one document basically that gets generated with the information here for my flow. So as you can see, I made it documents the name. Does it have a specific ID? We see here it has 5 variables, 28 actions. Then let me just zoom out a bit. There's the diagram coming that we see. Plus then we start talking about, for example, the connections that I use as part of this flow. So I know it's using the Outlook connector, the weather connector, and the users connector. It talks about the variables. So I know, for example, now, oh, this body to send variable is used in these actions, which also makes it very helpful sometimes, because I want to figure out, flow, hey, my flow is quite small here, but sometimes you have these huge flows and you've got a variable you use somewhere inside the flow. This way you can easily say, yes, my body to send variable, for example, is used in 2 different actions, where you see them there, relatively straightforward. Anyway, so let me just maybe look at the navigation pane. So as you see on the left, there's a standard structure that I'm using. So we document the variables, then we document the trigger. In this case, obviously, it's a weekly trigger, runs once a week. And then as you can see on the left, we've got all the actions. So as I said earlier, I said I just documented now, for example, by order of the name. That's why it's easy to say I want to look for my initialize. Obviously, then quite straightforward to find. Anyway, so what we have, for example, is part of the actions. Let's just say, for example, I'm going to use my, where is it? Get my profile here. As you can see, it's not always a very nice thing that gets documented. So here, for example, yes, it uses the Office Drive users to do something. And yeah, there's probably too much information that gets documented that's not relevant. But I decided rather a bit too much here. Because somebody at some point might need it, theoretically. I'm usually never looking at this part here, for example, but it's at least good to have. And yeah, for example, what I can see here, for example, I also see what, for example, what gets selected. So I say, for example, queries, it only selects the mail property as part of this action. Or if we go to, for example, set calendar events, for example, this variable, we can see calendar events. I want to figure out again, hey, what is that? Calendar events is a object. So I can easily see my set calendar events here is then, this object here, I can see, yeah, it sets the subject to this value, start time, end time, etc., etc. You get the idea. As you can see, it's not always 100%, you could say, clean when you look at it in the, let me just open it in Power Automate. Sorry, which one did I just look at? Set calendar events, which is here. Here, for example, you see it a bit more easily how it looks like in Power Automate then. So yeah, I've got a very code-focused view, you could say. Here's nicely formatted. So that might be something I might look at some point again to see how could, for example, this part here be improved. But yeah, anyway, you get the idea. Something is there, it gets documented. If basically somebody working on Power Automate flows looks at it, they might be able to actually make sense of it and understand what's happening here. And I think that's the key thing here. Future, like I said, might see improvements, but you get the idea. Now, quick other thing I want to show again is, for example, when I open an app, the same thing more or less happens. It opens the app file, it checks for details, it finds some stuff. So I can see here, actually, this is not just an app, but it's a whole solution. And let me just now go over to the generated solution. Yeah. Here we go. So what we have is, again, for example, then not just basically a documentation for the app itself, but in this case, because it's part of a full solution, then it also documents what's inside my solution. So here, that's something that I added, I think, a year ago or so, can't remember, but at a later stage, then yeah, you want to see basically not just individual apps, but really also, hey, what's the connection between apps and flows, etc. So what do I have inside this solution here? So I can see, for example, yeah, I've got here, for example, one Canvas app called Let's Learn, a small app that I developed for my kids. I see I've got some tables, and you can see, for example, yeah, how my tables are structured. So my question table has got, for example, here, alternative answer, correct answer, etc., etc. So I'm looking for statistics, yeah. And obviously here at the top, it then tells you also statistics, what you have inside your solution. So again, this is a relatively simple thing, but I'm just going to quickly run against the COE core components, which is, as you can see, a larger solution overall. That's going to take, I don't know, a minute or so, but just going to run in the background. Then obviously you get more insights here. Now, let me just check here. We've also got some information again about my Dataverse tables here. So I can see, for example, I've got my different tables, my question, quiz, score that I have documented. Plus in here, we also display this. And again, that's something I'm also working on because I realized it's not, again, as correct as it could be, should be. So constantly realizing the more I use it, the more I discover what could be enhanced and yeah, working on it. But yeah, you get the idea. At least you've got an insight saying, okay, my quiz is connected to question, my quiz connected to score, etc. Now, just quickly jumping also into the documentation for the application. So we can see I've got actually two files that I generate. One is a simpler version because I didn't want to put everything in there. So this is just a quick overview mostly of, again, app showing statistics, app properties, etc. Plus here, for example, you see, for example, hey, what's the default here for example, the size breakpoints property, and what do we have set as probably a custom parameter, etc. And when I go down, I see information about my variables, what's the variable name, where is it used, etc. And yeah, the more I scroll down, obviously, which data sources I have, etc., which resources do I have in my app. So I can see, yeah, there's the sample image that's always in there usually. I got my own images that I added here that we can see here. And yeah, then we also see, for example, that controls overview. So let me just show you my app quickly. So if I look at the structure here, I can see, for example, I've got 4 different screens. My home screen has got, for example, an image, some labels, some galleries, etc. And what I'm doing in here, for example, is trying to mimic basically how it gets displayed in the Power Apps Canvas editor. So you see here, basically, I've got my home screen, I've got my label, my gallery, what's inside the gallery, etc., etc. So again, making it hopefully useful for people trying to, I don't know, do some reviews or anything like that. So this is the simple version of the documentation. Let me just quickly open the other one again. That's the more detailed one. So detailed really meaning just dumping in a lot of additional things. For example, here we've got all the controls, not just the screens, but really when we look at the scrolls, for example, let's say we go to our home screen here. Obviously, I just generated that document and the Word finds it for the first time and is now trying to load it. But while that's working basically and repaginating, etc. So what's happening here is basically, again, I structure it according to what's available in my Canvas app. So I've got my home screen, I've got my different controls on that home screen. And for each of these controls, then I document what are their properties that are different from the default based on the settings that I defined in my Power Docu earlier. So here I see I've got my screen with my controls. So I see, for example, here, 3 latest quizzes is a label. And as you can see here, it tells me now, okay, for these properties, these are the ones that were, for example, changed. So it's not too much, but at least I know now, for example, oh, I'm not aligning it by left, which would be the default, but center it. I changed the font. And I think that's quite valuable to see, for example, what were the things that were customized? What things did you change? Because when you look at the app and, for example, select the control here, you wouldn't know what has been modified. I mean, you see a lot of properties here, the wrap, the vertical line, disabled colors, etc., etc. Here I can see immediately what has been actually changed compared to the default. So I'm not going to say use this for code review or anything like that, but it's something that I use, for example, to get a quick insight into, hey, for specific control on a specific screen, what were actually the changes that were done? The value, I think, is really when you, I don't know, get something in front of you that you haven't looked at a long time, or maybe you never even looked at it because somebody else was working on it. It really gives you some additional quick insights that might, help you then to figure out, oh, there's, again, something that was modified here in a certain way, and you can easily quickly find it out yourself.
Yeah. So just to unpack that delta or diff a bit, Rene. So what's that diff based on? Is it the previous version of the app, or is it based on something more complex than that?
It's actually much simpler. So it's really based on the default control. So simply said, let's just go maybe in here. So really, when I say I'm going to insert any of these, it gets added with all its default values. And that's basically what I used. I was thinking of, how can I do that or so? And I realized Microsoft had some other kind of solution. I think I forgot the name and I forgot what it actually did. But I realized they are actually doing exactly the same thing. So they basically exported the details for all these properties, for all these controls, and then basically compare it against. So I'm doing the same thing. So I realized what I might need to do is, for example, also check again, are there any new controls? For example, the new modern controls, I think, I'm not sure if I'm documenting them, but at some point what I did is selected every single control, exported it, and took basically that default definition for these controls and said, yeah, that's what we're going to compare against.
Okay, so those defaults, they're not packaged as part of the app when you export it, then you have to bring them separately, do you?
Well, I wouldn't know what the defaults basically are, you could say. So for example, if I export this app, obviously all the properties are exported. So it will tell me, for example, again, for example, my 3 latest quizzes label here, it will tell me font size 21. It will tell me font weight bold, etc., etc. But I wouldn't know whether it's a default value or whether it is a changed value. All I have is the value. And that's why I'm doing the comparison, saying, okay, for given value, for example, here we know this is the default value if you insert this gallery control, for example. So I know then, okay, I just compare and see, oh, it's different. So that's why we're documenting it. If it's exactly the same, then I'm not documenting it unless you say specifically here, document all properties. And just a quick note on that, as you can see, I could even say, document changes only and no default value. So it would only be the green part, for example, keeping possibly, what do you call that? Keeping it a bit flexible here. Yeah. But again, I mean, the use case, as you can see, is just described. It's not just, oh, I want to create some documentation so that you can file it away and everybody says, yes, done. But you could also then use it for various purposes. again, I'm not saying do a code review with it, but I realized I'm regularly using generated documentation to review certain parts. So again, reviewing, for example, the diagram that we saw here for a flow as an example. Now, that's not the flow here, something like this. I had a call with a colleague yesterday where we just did that exactly. So he opened first thing in Power Automate in the designer, but then we also switched over here. Simply said, it allowed us to quickly, I don't know, zoom in, zoom out, and focus on things without looking at the details for the actions. Where we then said, maybe we should move, I don't know, certain parts somewhere else, etc., etc. Separately, then obviously also this kind of documentation, as I described, I mean, you can easily find out where something is used. So I want to figure out, I think that's possibly in the app right now that you search, for example, for Arial, and it will tell you where the Arial font is used. But here, basically, what I did is then at some point, for example, I check, hey, is it used anywhere? No, it isn't used, or open sans serif. So I can see then, yeah, okay, this is the default that's used, something like that. I'm just curious. For example, right now we've got the variables, we've got that search. We didn't have the variables for a long time. I can't remember about the search when that was introduced or so, but I realized a lot of the things that are possible right now, for example, weren't possible 2 years ago or so. And yeah, that's when I used them, for example, just the generated documentation to, I don't know, figure out where is something used, or like I said, for example, I want to change the font. Is it still used somewhere that I didn't notice? Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. And
that's really good. I mean, just coming back to the use cases, it's obviously not just for documentation. You could use it for things like handing over to support team, or
exactly. Yeah.
I've worked with organizations who are really hot on things like compliance, so they want every little detail
Yeah.
documented. So something like this would be an absolute no-brainer for organizations like that. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really good.
Exactly. I
Other
mean,
thing,
yeah, I mean, the key
uh,
thing is, I think that I'm not telling you how you should use it. People say
yeah,
sometimes they're not interested in all that Word document, but they like
yeah,
the flowcharts, the images that get created. And again,
yeah.
that's awesome. I mean, if you see some value in it, that's good enough. I'm not telling everybody, oh, you have to use it the way I use it. People
Yeah,
might find
yeah,
different ways of using it. So
yeah,
yeah.
hundred
And just
percent,
to show
hundred
you
percent.
again, because that run I just checked for 5 minutes, basically, that's basically the COE core components. And you can see there's a lot in there. So that is something that I also used, for example, to review at some point, for example, what kind of new things might have been introduced in the COE. So I want to see, for example, some changes between different flows or so. So I created basically different documentations for my different versions of the COE toolkit, or our own solutions, for example, and just put something side by side. So I got an easy, quick comparison. Just to show you, for example, documented solution, as you can see, that's now a bit more complex. So we see, for example, yeah, there's a lot more that gets documented. So you can see, obviously, there's, let me just open the statistics. So there's a lot more, obviously, in here than in my own small solution. But I think the important thing is really that that's something I'm trying to enhance over time. For example, again, it's going to take a minute again to, I know there is, for example, the security roles, what I wanted to have, for example, for our own custom security roles that we create. Yeah, I wanted to get that basically exported in that format that we saw for the longest time, obviously, then see, hey, how is it being set? So I see, hey, admin environment add-ons is, for example, here only set for read and write, nothing else for this particular security role, something like that. Basically, is then where I thought, hey, that's actually also quite useful, and so it was added at some point in time.
Yeah, no, that's really good. It's really neat. I mean, it looks like you've got plenty of test solutions and things to test your
Yeah,
code with, right? So that's really good.
that's the.
You
It's
can cover
interesting. I
everything.
mean, the moment you make a change and then you test it, and then you realize you broke a lot of things, so it doesn't always succeed. And yeah,
Yeah,
the more you build, the more you need to test, obviously. So I
yeah,
constantly throw a lot of things at it to see whether it's still working or whether I missed something, etc.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I'll
So
call it a
just
never-ending thing, but yeah, happening
yeah,
all
yeah,
the time. Yeah.
yeah. So just coming to the logic of actually
Yeah.
generating the Word document then. So is that just using the OpenXML SDK then?
Correct. So what I actually did is there's again the standard SDK from Microsoft that I then used to, so to say, manually create my own Word document. When I say manually, obviously that's through the official SDK, but there's a lot of things that I'm doing, as in I create the document, I create with a certain standard set of properties, so to say. I create my headers, I create my tables, and obviously tables are never nice, but it seemed like the best option here. And for example, what we saw below here, then with the images, I add the images, etc. But yeah, that's all default SDK basically. So it was interesting because for quite a while I was, you could say, working more on how do I actually create the Word document and make it work, instead of actually focusing on how can I document my apps, my flows, etc. Because that was one key thing for me. People want to have Word documents, obviously, a lot, and it had to
Yeah.
work. So
Yeah.
a long time I
They
was
need to be,
trying to really make it work properly and such. But yeah,
yeah, yeah, they need to be usable, right? Otherwise, there's no point generating documentation
yeah,
if people
exactly.
can't
Yeah.
navigate it. And just even simple things like, you're listing, for example, for the documentation for the Canvas app, you're listing your screens and then your components on those screens separately. So if those
Yep.
components are on certain pages, is there a way within the Word document to kind of navigate between the two? Just simple things like that kind of enhance the
So
experience of
obviously, I
using it.
mean, let me just maybe move here. So for example, I know my background home image that I'm just seeing here right now. I know, for example, here all the properties, and I see, for example, what's the parent control. So I see parent control is home. Let me just see, this one is not clickable, so that's probably a something I could improve. I just realized. I thought it's working. I know at least in the flow I can, for example, we just go over to this one. For example, I know, for example, hey, next action condition, there is a link to it. So when I click on this here with my control left click, it brings me directly to that action.
Nice, perfect.
Yeah, as you see, Billy, I mean, whenever I use it, also there's always something that could be improved. So
No, it's
yeah,
brilliant.
at least I know where it is, and I could now go over here to my home screen, etc. But yeah, there are options
exactly
then. Yeah,
no, that's really nice.
yeah.
No, this is brilliant work. I just can't express in words how useful
Yeah.
this would be. It's amazing. Um, okay, did you have any other things to show us on the demo, or
I
can we
think
dig a bit
that's
deeper?
yeah. I think that's basically key thing for now. I mean,
Okay,
yeah, we've seen everything.
cool. Okay, so I saw in your
Mm.
more recent post when you've released version 2 that there's an exciting feature with the ability to basically run this in a non-interactive manner,
Yeah.
which makes it more suitable for scenarios where you want to, for example, run it from the command line or
Yeah. Mm.
integrate it into automated build and deployment processes as part of Azure DevOps pipeline or GitHub Action or
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
Is that something you could kind of demo as well, or
I
at least talk
can't
about?
right now.
Okay, no, that's
Reason
cool.
behind it is I don't have a proper Azure DevOps pipeline or anything like that set up right
No,
now. I broke things and haven't had
no,
time to fix it yet.
that's
Yeah.
okay. That if you want,
Yeah.
that can wait for a future episode. You can come back
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
show us that magic later on. But in terms of just unpacking your journey in building that as well,
Yeah.
did you do you have to maintain a separate code base, or have you got a kind of generic common code which is shared by both the Windows app and the console version of the
It's
application?
actually the same app. That's the interesting things. And it was actually not basically enhanced that way by me, but somebody else,
Okay.
Aiden Cole. So I
Right.
had it on my backlog for the longest time to look into it, but it was somewhere in the backlog, and the backlog is constantly growing. So I think it's never even
Mhm.
getting closer to getting looked at.
Yeah.
So somebody else, basically Aiden, he saw, I need to have it basically. So he saw a lot of value in Power Docu, but he didn't want to use the GUI. He wanted to basically document, I don't know, whenever you, I don't know, checking an app or so or a solution into DevOps, then sometimes when there's a new solution, for example, a new version, have it create automatically some documentation, because
Yeah.
what PowerDocu also does, as we've seen briefly, is it can also create markdown content, and that is obviously something that you can easily then use within DevOps as well. So he then actually figured out how that could be done so that we keep the existing application, but if you call it from, again, from a command line, for example, it gets executed as a, so to say, as a command line version instead of a GUI application, something like that. So he then basically made it work also with Azure DevOps overall. And like I said, I managed to make it work for me, and then I managed to break it and haven't had time to fix it yet. But it's really quite useful. It's the more you work, obviously, with your I don't know, CI/CD processes or just the regular build deployment processes, it can be quite useful to say, yeah, I don't want to do things manually, but rather have it documented and have the documented files directly in the DevOps repository. So that's obviously extremely helpful. It's still something I think I want to look at again relatively soon so that there's a bit more documentation around it, because right now all I'm saying is, okay, look at what Aiden has done and try to do it yourself as well. That's why I wanted to basically so to say build my own mini setup where I can then showcase how it could be done. But yeah, depends on how much time I have and when I can look into it again. But definitely then it definitely moved up basically in my backlog from it's somewhere in there to, I don't call it, it's at the top right now, but it's very high up right now.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That can wait for the next time you come on the show, Rene. Okay, but I mean, if we talk about just the execution of the application, then you run it as an exe, but would it run on a non-Windows machine as well? And likewise for the command line tool, would it run on a non-Windows agent or a non-Windows runner?
I'm not entirely sure. I never tried it. That was never even my focus. I mean, it's completely set up on .NET. I'm specifically saying that my executable is a Windows executable. So my assumption is if you try to run it somewhere else, for example, through any ways, and I'm not even sure which ways there are right now, for example, to run, let's say, something on Linux or so, when you've got a Windows executable or so, not even sure if it would work. So really key focus is on Windows things right now.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, my focus for the last 4 or 5 years has been in the CI/CD space for Power Platform. So I'm really fascinated by integrating something like this into a build and deployment process. And with the current client I'm working with, for cost reasons, they basically want me to move all of our build processes to run on our Linux-based runners in GitHub. So that'll be something I'll need to test out. And I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, we'll gladly listen to your feedback.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so obviously this is a standalone application that runs totally separately to everything else. Was there any reason you made that choice rather than having it as a tool within the external toolbox or something?
I would say that's mostly for simplicity's sake initially, because when I started, like I said, it was a small proof of concept. So obviously I just built a small console application to see if it works. I mean, I had it roughly in my mind to say, okay, I want to keep it a bit more flexible. So don't just put, simply said, all code into a single code file, but make sure you get some proper classes it set up, etc. I mean, it was still all in a single project and such, so not something that turned out to be ideal in the long run. And I still have some things that I want to probably split up, but yeah, goal for me was really just to get something set up for myself. Now, I still thought at some point, gonna look at whether there's a way, for example, to say I take part of my code base and have it then basically as a tool within XIM Toolbox, obviously. I mean, it's called the big standard, obviously, for a lot of Power Platform people, obviously. There's so many tools and plugins, basically, that you have in there. I mean, I would happily have mine in there as well. But if I remember correctly, there are some, let's call it technical challenges. I think that's mostly related to the what do you call it? The other dependencies I have on other libraries. I might look into it again at some point, but I'm not too experienced in that development aspect. So I had other people also had a look at it, and the feedback I got was that it's probably not possible. So Carl Cookson, for example, also talked to me quite some time ago. I think that was even 2 years ago, so I can't remember when. It's been quite a while. But yeah, he also then had a conversation with me because he thought, he might want to at least use some of my code for something, or maybe he could use the whole thing in XM Toolbox. But yeah, I think the way it is set up right now is probably still not obviously the perfect .NET example of how you should basically, so to say, set up your projects and your solution and structure it. But to me, it was just something that grew a bit organically, not because I wanted it to be. I'm not saying I didn't want it to be perfect from the start, but I just wanted to get something done instead of having it perfect. Obviously, then yeah.
No, that's fair enough. Sometimes you have to make these sorts of decisions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I built and published my first XRM Toolbox tool in September last year, and I did it in XRM Toolbox because I knew there's already an existing kind of community of users who use it and people know about it. There's 350 plus tools out there, so it was kind of my way to kind of get myself out there effectively with an existing audience of users. So I just found the adoption of the tool for that reason has has taken off quite well. Yeah, no, that's cool. So how do people get access to the application then? Is it it's a standalone exe? So I'm guessing it's in releases in your GitHub repo?
Yeah, so I have a dedicated GitHub repo where all the code is in, obviously, and where I publish all the corresponding releases. So all you need to go is to the GitHub repo, select the latest release. I've got two versions in there. One is I forgot what it's called. Basically, it doesn't require you to. I hope I'm explaining it the right way. One is basically making the assumption, yes, you've got your .NET, everything fully installed on your Windows machine. The other one was something I set up because people initially said, oh, I need to install something. It doesn't quite work. So it includes all relevant .NET additional libraries, etc. So it should work by itself. That's basically let's call it the fail-safe application. And as you can hear, basically, I mean, I'm not a programmer with lots of experience. I'm just basically, university. I had some programming classes regularly over years, did some things. So right now I'm still at that point where I do things to make it work, but sometimes all those, let's call it the best way to do something is probably not something that I actually know about or so, but it's working.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's a different domain, right? Packaging software and shipping it in the most usable format is a different kind of mindset. That's cool.
Yeah. Anyway, people just need to download it, execute it, and ideally it runs. I say ideally because obviously we realize that it works in 95% of the cases or so, but then there are some where I say, oh, it's not working for me. I think if you run it in an Azure VM, it didn't run, or some very funny things sometimes happen. Yeah. No, but it's quite stable, at least right now. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And in terms of runtime, just coming back to the actual running of the tool, it ran quite quickly for the small solutions you kind of demonstrated there. So are you using any APIs to kind of grab the kind of metadata for the components that are in the solution and in the flows and app, or is it basically a case of interrogating the JSON and the XML that is embedded within those files and interpreting that and documenting it? Is that
exactly
what you're doing?
So it's a lot of manual plumbing in there. So really what I did is, like I said earlier, is really I took the exported solution or exported app flow and really looked at what's inside those XML definition files or JSON definition files and do a lot of manual parsing. I think that's more or less really how it just got started. I tried to see if there's a smart way of getting information. I couldn't find anything, so I said, okay, I'm just gonna basically do the manual activity of really, let's read all the JSON, read all the XML, and then just manually, so to say, go through. Might not always be, it was a lot of manual coding then, and a lot of time right now even is spent basically trying to enhance it that way. Not sure if there's a better way right now of doing it, but that's really how I got started with it, and how it's working at least right now.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So do you ever find where, for example, with Microsoft releasing an update into the platform, do you find that the schema of the XML or JSON changes and causes the tool to fail or cause errors?
I didn't see anything like that, actually. I mean, most of the time I would say you could say, I don't want to call it backwards compatible, but I think the changes that get introduced are, you could say, additional things mostly. I mean, when we look at, for example, Canvas apps, you might have some new controls, for example, meaning then there's just some new definitions. So might just be that, for example, oh, there's a new control available. Let's call it a modern label, for example. if I don't, for example, provide the default values for the modem label, it wouldn't know about it. So it's just going to assume, it's just going to document everything. So I think the key risk right now is not that, so to say, Microsoft breaks something when you run PowerDocu against something that, I don't know, has been newly introduced, but rather it will not be able to manage it in an as efficient manner as it might do with the others. Or again, it might just ignore the code because, like I said, I'm doing things manual. So it might say, oh, there's a new, I don't know what to call it. Let's say there's a new component type within the Power Platform. So you can now add what has been recently added. Trying to remember, there were new things that you could add to Power BI, to Power Platform solutions. Was it Power BI
There's
dashboards or?
Yeah, that came in recently. There's Power Pages
Sometimes I
sites that
can't
have
remember
come in.
when something gets added, so I just accept it. Yeah, it's in there right now, but I'm not quite sure whether it's recent or a bit older. But those things, for example, I might just ignore right now, so to say, where I just need to check, hey, if it's new, does it even get documented or is it getting ignored in a way? That's obviously the drawback. If I, so to say, don't specifically tell PowerDocu to document something, it might not get documented.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes sense. I mean, that list of object types within a solution is always growing anyway, so I can imagine it's
exactly,
hard to keep on top of. Another one that came in recently was enhanced data model Power Pages sites. Obviously, a solution aware now, so that's going to be something else to potentially look at. All right, cool. So people can download the exe from a GitHub repo. That's fine. Are there any licensing or other cost implications that people should be aware of?
Nothing. I mean, it's completely free, no other costs, anything. Only thing, obviously, to keep in mind is that, as we've seen, I run it against local files, so you need to export your apps and flows manually, obviously, unless you try to use it via DevOps, then obviously. But that's about it. Otherwise, like I said, completely free, no plans to, I don't know, charge people. Like I said, I mean, to me, that started as a small personal thing to, solve my own problems. Other people find it useful, then I'm happy enough, basically. So really, that's it.
It's brilliant. Thanks for that. So I've seen that it's open source on GitHub, right? So people can go in and see the code. Are you happy for people to contribute as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I actually obviously put it online, because my idea was not to be the sole contributor of everything, but hopefully that other people will also make some contributions if they see that there's something missing or if they find an issue. So most of the contributions were, for example, fixes. When I say most, it hasn't been too many, so I'm still doing, I don't know, 95% of the work or so. But every now and then somebody says, oh, I fixed the problem for you. Because again, I do not always know everything when it comes to how solutions are used somewhere, or you might call your flow in a very unusual way, for example, add I don't know, an emoji or a foreign character, for example, something like that, and it breaks. It always works for me, but other people have other ways of, I don't know, creating their apps, flows, etc. So there's always a chance that somebody does something that breaks PowerDocu, so to say. And I'm happy to basically then see people coming saying, hey, fix something for you. Here's my pull request. And usually they're extremely helpful, obviously, then,
So you're happy, I guess people just fork your repo and then create a pull request to merge back in.
Yeah,
cool.
I took a long break last year, so there were some changes, for example, with DevOps that were, so to say, didn't go through the full pull request and approve cycle, basically. So there was a slow time, but now I'm trying to see basically that things are getting continuously and actively developed again. So anytime basically there is some kind of contribution, I'm trying to get it into the code base done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So Rene, you've had some great feedback from the community on PowerDocu. I've seen you've had conversations with Mark Smith on his podcast and a few others. I think April Dunham you spoke to as well a while ago. So is there anything specific you've done to kind of promote your application to the community, or has it just taken off like from your posts on social media?
Yeah, basically just social media. I mean, all I did was I initially published it, talked about it a bit on Twitter and LinkedIn. So I think that mostly switched over to LinkedIn, and then it was just really that you could say organic growth over time. So more people learned about it and wanted to learn more about it, or had feedback or shared it with others. So I see it, for example, in the number of downloads. I mean, I was happy at some point when I saw, wow, 50 people downloaded a specific version. That was, to me, awesome. 50 people is a big number for something where I thought, yeah, maybe 5 people are going to check it out and one's going to complain or kind of thing. And I forgot the recent numbers, but there are, I would have to check again how many, but there were so many downloads that I didn't expect. Obviously, where I thought 2.5 years ago when I worked on that, didn't expect it to be used at this kind of scale, basically. So yeah, I'm not really promoting it, I would say, too actively. I mean, like I said, whenever I've got something new, I publish a comment, basically a small post on LinkedIn, and that's more or less about it. Yeah.
This community is just amazing, right? There's so many people are happy to help and support you and stuff, and you just need to come out with an idea like this and just share it with people, and it just really takes off. It's just so nice to see.
Yeah, exactly.
So you say you've been building this for about 2.5 years now. Would you say it's reached a kind of state of maturity, or do you have any plans for future releases, new features, enhancements, that kind of stuff?
Maturity, yes and no. I mean, yes, as in, for example, for me, the version 1.0 was the one thing where I thought, yes, now it's in a state where I'm quite happy with it. And I say quite happy because I'm obviously never happy with it. Because I mentioned I've got a backlog, which is mostly, I know, lots of people saying, oh, can you do this? Can you document data flows, model-driven apps? We talked about it. Whenever I use it, I figure out, oh, there's something else that's missing or that could be enhanced. For example, I mentioned I had a call with a colleague yesterday, and during our review of a flow, I realized, oh, there's something I could improve as part of the diagram, etc. So is it mature? Yes. Is it anywhere where I think it's actually at a state where I'm not going to put in much more effort? I would say actually no. I mean, future enhancements, new features, I would say yes, there's going to be, I'm going to say a lot. Obviously, like I mentioned all the time, it's depends on how much time I have to do stuff, etc. That sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. But yes, model-driven apps, data flows, obviously the DevOps integration right now. Those are just basically a few things on top of my mind right now where I say I definitely need to work on that again a bit more to, I don't know, continuously enhance it. And yeah, goal for me is probably to, I don't know, just continue working on it without having a, you could say, a fixed final state or something like that in mind. I'm not saying, okay, I need to add features A, B, C, and then it's done, or so to say. But yeah, just gonna continue working on it. And obviously, as we know, Microsoft is working on things constantly, so there's always something new. So I'm always expecting something new to come up. So my thought, the next thing is obviously, oh, Copilot Studio. I'm pretty sure somebody asked previously about Power Virtualizations. I said, yeah, maybe at some point. But now that Copilot Studio is, I don't know, seeing that much traction, I also think, yeah, maybe I should check that out again as well. So long story short, lots of things I'm still planning to do, but I don't have any fixed schedule or anything like that. I'm just gonna, so to say, continuously work on it.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's so good to hear. Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing your updates on that and see how things progress with that on PowerDocu. Listen, Rene, this has been an amazing experience talking to you. I don't have any further questions, and I'm really grateful for you for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us. And I'm sure this is going to be useful to a lot of people as well. So thank you once again, and
Yeah.
I hope you can come back on the show at a later date to show us the DevOps side of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, happy to showcase any new enhancements in a, I don't know, half a year's time or so. Yeah. And thank you for having me.